So here's a quick video to illustrate setting up Azure Container Service cluster with Docker Swarm. So we get started with this Azure portal here, and then here I have a template that goes ahead and deploys a Docker Swarm cluster. And if I click open this template here, and I'm using this capability in Azure portal where you can come in and store your ARM templates, and then very convenient, you can then come in and simply click on the template and hit deploy. So that's what I've done. This is my template that is going to deploy a Docker Swarm cluster based on the Azure Container Service. So as part of this demonstration, what I did was I went ahead and deployed this cluster. And then I supplied a bunch of parameters and resource groups. So to save us some time, I ran this, and this took a few minutes. Let me just go back here to the home page, and let's try to type in the resource group name. And this is the resource group that contains the Docker Swarm cluster. As you can see here, a bunch of resources that have been provisioned as part of the resource group of interest to us. You can see the master here. I've selected a single master configuration. You can see the two agents here. You can see the virtual network. You can see a bunch of storage accounts, etc. So what we're going to do here is we are going to log in into the master here and then start out a few Docker containers. So in order to SSH into the master, let me go ahead and grab the IP address here. And let's bring our SSH client here. And the host name, I'm going to type in the IP address. I can use either. I'm just going to use the IP address here. And I want to make sure I've also supplied the auth, which I have, and I've turned down the allow agent forwarding. Let's just go ahead and log in now. And let me just change the fonts here really quickly. Okay, that's much better. I'm going to log in as Azure user here. And then let me supply the password here. So at this point, we have logged in into the master machine. And then from here, we can invoke our Docker commands. But before we do that, let me talk a little bit about what Docker image are we going to run. And I have a slide here which will talk about that. I basically started out with an ASP.NET application that I had developed on the Windows platform. I converted that application to run on Linux and then create a Docker image out of that. And here are the steps very briefly. So use the ASP.NET generator, modified project.json, then ran Docker build. And then finally, I took that Docker image and published it to my public Docker registry, which is the last command here. And this is indeed the image that we are going to use to start Docker containers in this Docker Swarm cluster that we have created. So let's go back to our SSH session here. And now we are ready to start our Docker container here. So the command that I want to show you here is, so I'm talking to the Docker host, then I want to run a container with a certain name. and then I want to run it on port 8080. I'll explain this. And then I'm pulling in the image from my public Docker registry account here, and this is the name of the image. Okay, so let's just go ahead and run this. Looks like our container did indeed start. Let us go back to the Azure portal here. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the public IP address for the agent. Note that we were logged on to the master. Now we need to go to the agent, find the public IP address of the agent. And right here is the public IP address for the agent. Let's just grab the DNS name here. And let us just invoke this command. And I'm going to supply the port 8080, which I had supplied here. Let's just try to bring this up. And looks like our application did indeed come up here. Let me show you the significance of port 8080 here. If you look at the public IP address here, let's just go back here. Let's go back to the agent load balancer. And if you look at the load balancing rules here, I have defined a rule for 8080. Let's just look into this. It is defined for port 8080, and then it uses a probe called TCP port 8080 probe. Let's just come out and just look at the probes. And if I look at the TCP port 8080 probe here, you will see that it is associated with port 8080. Okay. So in fact, if I go back to my SSH session here, and let's just very quickly see that we have a container that is running, which we started about 2 minutes back. And just to prove the point that I can start another Docker container using the same image, however on a different port. So I'm going to run this command again. And this time I'm going to specify port. So at this point, I'm going to start another Docker container, the same Docker image, except I'm going to run it on port 8081. And let's just run this command here. And you can see that this container also did indeed start. Let's just go and look at all the containers that are running. So here's the other one that just started 17 seconds ago here. And if I once again go back to my portal and this time enter. So let me go ahead and load this URL with port 8081. And since we did start the other container on port 8081, this application comes up. So at this point, we have 2 copies of the application hosted in 2 separate containers based on the same Docker image running. So this brings us to the close of this very quick demonstration. We started out provisioning an ACS cluster based on Docker Swarm. Then we logged on to the master, and then we took an existing ASP.NET application, which we had converted previously into a Docker image. And then using that image, we started out 2 containers, one listening on port 8080, other listening on port 8081. So hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching.